Coaching is not an easy job since a coach can make or break a team, so it's vital for every team to have a good coach. I mean, Blue Lock itself is a statement about how coaching can completely affect a player, since, for example, because of the coaching style of Izuki's high school coach, Izuki completely had his ego sealed and went from being one of the best players in his community to an unknown name. And it was only through Ego's coaching with the creation of the Blue Lock project that someone like Izuki was able to grow into the incredible player that we see today. But the majority of the story has been through Ego's coaching and his mindset, so it was interesting seeing the players go through coaching from different pro players with different mindsets. And today I wanted to dissect the coaching of each of these master strikers and actually rank them from best to worst. So if you enjoyed today's video, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, since anything and everything helps with the channel. Before we get into the video, there is something I want to state now when it comes to this ranking. I'll only be looking at how the coaches have impacted specifically the Blue Lock players. So characters such as Kaiser, Lorenzo, and Charles will not be taken into account, since the Master Strikers were specifically brought in to help the Blue Lock players in the NEL. And I just wanted to make that clear, since I know some people might use these characters as either a positive or negative examples for the coaches. And while these characters will be briefly mentioned throughout the video, they will not be main factors in terms to how I rank the coaches and how the coaches handle them. But with that, let's get into the actual ranking and get into our last place spot, which is Lavinio. Now, most people probably aren't surprised by this, since for the longest time, people thought the FC Baccia was the worst team. Obviously now, as much as it hurts to say, I have to give that crown to Manshine, but I'll talk more about Manshine when we discuss Chris Prince in the ranking. So part of the reason why a lot of people thought that Baccia was a bad team is pretty much the team was only two people, which was Bachira and Otoya. And while the rest of the teams at least had multiple players that were doing well, and while eventually we would get more players from Baccia that would play, it still doesn't show great results, since they actually did collect a bit of data about not only how many people from each team played by the end of the league, but how many of those people made it into the top 23. And while we'll reveal the results for the other teams later, for Baccia, they had 8 people play, but only 2 people make it into the top 23, which isn't great results. And to no one's surprise, those 2 people is Bachira and Otoya. And I do think that this directly ties in with Lavinio's coaching style, since his style is very hands-off. I mean, he tells the Blue Lock players on their very first day that he isn't going to teach them anything about football, and that they need to use their own originality and creativity to put it into their own style, and that it has to come from themselves, which instantly makes sense to Bachira, who gets very excited since he's basically already been doing that with his monster. And then we would eventually also see Otoya understand this concept as well. And to start off with the positives, Lavinio does help Bachira quite a lot, since he got the advice he needed to take his monster to the next level and to make it into his own unique and creative style. But if you aren't someone like Bachira, who already has that creativity and imagination inside themselves, it would probably be hard and confusing to figure out what Lavinio means. And the fact that so many of his players didn't make it onto the team shows that, like Lavinio said, he wasn't going to go through the effort to show them how his advice translates to football and actually teach them. You either get it right away or you just had to figure it out for yourself. I think Lavinio is correct. Creativity and originality are very important, since Nagi shows the results of not having those things, but with his hands-off approach to coaching and needing to already come into his team with a pretty active imagination to thrive under his coaching, he has landed in the bottom spot. Now, this next placement might or might not come as a surprise, especially if you know my history with this character and my channel, but we have none other than the world's best striker himself, Noel Noa. And no, this isn't just because he was revealed to be an antagonist, since I've been a leader of the Noel Noa is a bad coach campaign way before the reveal happened. I will say that it didn't help me improve my opinion on him, since at some point I did have Noel Noa in last place, but I decided due to things that I'll mention in a minute, I'll put him in fourth. But I'm not gonna lie that it was at some points a back and forth between him and Lavinio, which when you think about that, that's not great, since we have a lot of content for how Noel Noa is as a coach, and most of it is not great. I think originally when I was just even proposing the idea that Noel Noa could be a bad coach, people didn't love the take, but I feel now, especially with the reveal of his true intentions, I feel like a lot more people have come around to the idea of Noel Noa not being a great coach, especially seeing how little his coaching has improved since the start of the arc. Noel Noa is the only coach that we get to see from start to finish, so you would think there would be an evolution with his coaching and it would get better, but can you really say that Noah's coaching changed throughout the arc? His strategy in the beginning was basically, yeah, just win, and that's the same thing that he was pretty much saying the entire time. But yeah, I remember when the formation for the final lineup against PXG came out, I think that's when I started to see more people go like, yeah, Noah isn't a great coach. Keeping two original bastard players who hadn't done much, taking off Yukimiya, one of the only people on the team to score, and Corona was a choice, and then not having Isagi be one of the main strikers, even though he had clearly shown he deserves that spot, especially with his performance in the Ubers match where he even outdid Kaiser, but still isn't given the spot. Since yeah, Noel Noa would eventually change up the formation during the PXG match, but it shouldn't have taken it this long for it to happen. Obviously, we now know why it seems he didn't seem to care as much as the other coaches, since yeah, Chris Prince and Loki did come into the league with their own intentions as well, but we still see them taking steps to ensure the players are having something taken away with them when they leave the league. Wow, what did Noel Noa really teach the members? Since probably the biggest thing that came out of the league for the Bastard team was Metavision from Isagi, and he came up with that himself, since after the Manshine match, he even ended up explaining the concept to Noel Noa. I mean, even Lavinio, who I had put at the bottom, we at least saw how his advice to Bachira directly impacted the way that Bachira thought and unlocked his own unique style. While looking back, who did Noel Noa directly impact? I mean, I'm sure he has impacted the players in some ways, it's just really hard to tell, because I mean, you could argue Kaiser, since this whole thing was basically a test for him by Noel Noa, but like I said, I'm not counting the non-Blue Lock players. So besides that, it's just hard to figure out who he directly contributed to when it comes to the Blue Lock players. I mean, we see him looking in on practices and explaining stats to the players, but typically they're not things that the players didn't already know. And I could already hear the counter to this, well, he's winning, so he must be doing something right. But honestly, for example, Bastard probably would have lost their match against Ubers if it wasn't for Hiyori getting subbed in, since even Isagi said that would happen, and it is Isagi who had to argue to get Hiyori in the match, even though he had worse stats. Since it's almost like Noel Noa's philosophy of just following stats is flawed, and maybe if he gave more of the Blue Lock players a chance earlier on, then we could have seen an even stronger team, since the two prime examples of the whole strictly only letting in players based on members being shown to not work is with Isagi and Hiyori, both two players who Noah didn't want to let into the matches just because they didn't have the best members at the time. So I just think that not only does Noah not do a good job of directly coaching the team, since we have seen better examples of direct coaching from the above coaches on this list, but the bits that he does teach has flaws. Plus, for a team like Bastard, they really did fight hard for themselves to get those wins, because if Noah wasn't around for those matches, how much would have they changed in terms of results, besides the 3 minutes when the master strikers are let on and he holds back the other striker? But before we move on, getting into the data, Noel Noa does have some of the best results in this category, since every single one of his players played, except for one, RIP Naru, and all of them made the top 23 that did play except for igaguri. But it's almost worse that everyone but one player didn't get to play, since Naru never even got the chance to prove himself. And you could say, well, he didn't have the stats to get on the field. But like I said earlier, Noah's already been proven that his philosophy is flawed. And two, Noah already gone against his philosophy by PXG, since you can't tell me that Igaguri had better stats than Naru. Noah wanted to utilize Igaguri's skills for foul, so why not also give Naru the chance to prove himself as well? Since if it was multiple players that never got the chance to play, then that would be clearly someone following their philosophy, but having it be everyone but one person, it's just another example of how Noah doesn't care how this would affect Naru to be the only person left out on his team. I think Noah is a prime example that just because you're the best at something doesn't mean that you're the best person to teach it. Entrepreneurs might be able to make companies, but that doesn't mean they're the best person to manage it. Anyways, I know this isn't helping me beat the I hate Noel Noa allegations, but this guy's a bad coach, so let's move on to some actually good coaches now. Now, at the member 3 spot, we have Mr. Member 2 himself, Chris Prince. Now, I know some people are probably going to be like, wow, you think one of the best coaches comes from a team that didn't win one game. The manshine bias is really showing, but let me explain before anyone hates on this placement. The reason why I put Chris Prince this high is because on an individual level, I feel like Chris Prince has been able to create some of the best direct results we have seen. He was able to physically change Chigiri, Ryo, and Nagi's bodies to be on a completely new level in just 20 days with personalized training for each of them. We were able to see the direct results of Chris Prince training as well, since, for example, Ryo told him that his most ideal style was a combination of Sai and Rin styles, and Chris Prince told him that he would help him analyze his data to see what type of body he would need to get to this point, and then he actually helped him get to that point with his copy ability. And he did the same thing with Chigiri by helping him directly get his 44 Panther snipe and telling him that the left wing was his strong point, which are things that he could take with him beyond the league. Plus, Chigiri's stats after his coaching with Chris Prince were insane. Now, in the case of Nagi, who obviously struggled throughout the league, Chris Prince tried to help Nagi, but he gave up listening to him, and I don't think that's Chris Prince's fault, since you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force that horse to drink the water. I think Chris Prince should have removed him as the center to really teach him a lesson. So I do absolutely think that is a poor coaching decision on his part, since he should have recognized by game 2 that he should have been removed, and knowing that part of the reason why Chris Prince came to the league was to get more exposure for himself. I do continue to speculate that the reason why he kept him on is because he was the most popular player on the team, and Chris wanted to keep Nagi as the center so he could continue to get the public's attention. But even though he has his own ulterior motive, unlike Noah, who wanted to push Kaiser to make himself stronger, we do see Chris Prince still help the players. And like I said, he gave them skills that they could use as players beyond the league. And for the argument of, well, Manshine lost every single one of their games, Nagi has to want to learn things from Chris Prince. You can't tell me that if Chris Prince wasn't coaching the PXG players or the Bastard players, he wouldn't be winning just as many games as the others. Since Chigiri was one of the only players still left listening to him, and he did very well, while Ryo and Nagi decided to do their own thing, which led to their own downfall. So I don't think Chris Prince could be blamed for that entirely, since yes, there are maybe steps he could have taken to better ensure that they did listen to him, but at the end of the day, they willingly chose to not listen to him anymore. And as for the data, I will say that Manshine has the same stats as Bacha, which is only 2 of the players made it into the top 23, with it being Chigiri and Ryo. But unlike Lavinio and Noah, we did see Chris Prince give attention to multiple players. And part of the reason why Ryo even made it into the top 23 is because Chris Prince didn't give up on him and told him to score, knowing that it was his last chance. So it really shows that Chris Prince did care about the players outside of Nagi, since if he didn't help Ryo in that moment, then he would have gotten onto the team and would have been locked off. Other positives that I'll give is that he also gives opportunities to other players outside of his team, with Chris Prince choosing Yukimiya to be in the brand deal, which this is a smaller thing, but Yuki wasn't even on his team and Chris Prince was supposed to just do the brand deal himself, but he decided to ask the company himself to let Yukimiya be a part of the ad, which has given Yukimiya a huge opportunity and positively impacts his career since he's a model outside of Blue Lock. Like, of course, Chris Prince wasn't just doing this out of the kindness of his heart, since he himself says that he collabs with anyone that's going viral and knows that Yukimiya is a hot topic after scoring the winning goal in Manshine, and that it'll boost the ad to have Yukimiya on it as well. But we know Chris can be a pretty petty guy at times, seeing even though Isagi was considered the man of the match and is even more popular than Yukimiya with the public, he still rejected the idea of doing any ads with him. So he could have been extra petty and only chosen a member of his own team to do the ad, or just do it himself, but he did go out of his way to include Yukimiya and boost his popularity as well, while also giving Yukimiya opportunity. So it was a mutually beneficial kind of thing. I will say that a negative for Chris Prince is that he's the least mature of all the coaches and doesn't set the best example for his team. Since he was beefing with actual teenagers, I mean, Loki was much more better behaved than him, and he's an actual teenager. But I don't think that con outweighs all the good he's done. Plus, with the next person on this list, I do think that they made smarter coaching decisions that benefited more members of their team, since while I think Chris Prince was a really good coach and one of the best on this list, honestly, I am brutally ranking them in terms of how good they were as master strikers and helping the Blue Lock members move on from the final selection. And I think Chris Prince only having 2 players move on does hurt him in this ranking, but there was no way I was putting him below Noel Noa. So for now, he's sitting comfy in the 3rd place spot. Next, for the 2nd place spot on this list, we have the youngest master striker, which is Loki. Before the PXG versus Bastard match, I remember I made a poll about the master strikers, and I remember someone made a comment that Loki's coaching style is more what they thought Noah's was going to be. And I have to agree, the fact that Loki takes the time to individually break down how each player can improve, and even already super good players such as Shidou and Rin, feels a lot more logical than just go out there and win and get better members if you want to play. It felt like Loki was giving the Blue Lock players actual fundamental things to work and improve upon that they could use beyond the league, which is similar to Chris Prince. Plus, I felt like Loki made some of the smartest coaching decisions, like taking advantage of being able to substitute as much as you want and actually trying different formations and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and actually try to learn something new from each match. And this shows that just because you're winning, that doesn't mean you don't have to try anything new, unlike some people. And Loki's style matches much better with the Blue Lock style, which translated well for the PXG players. I will bring up that one fundamental problem with all the master strikers, including our 1st place spot, which is not taking advantage of the talents of all the players on the team and just letting some of them be bench warmers, when we at least knew that at that point the majority of players that were left were somewhat good. So it feels odd to not give them the opportunity to at least play. But Loki seemed to have given his players the most chances to shine by subbing them in and out, plus doing various different formations, with the Rin and Shidou formation being the final one that was the best of both worlds, and he came up with that after trials and errors. Plus, I will say that Loki was able to do something that not even Ego was able to do, which is actually make it work so Rin and Shidou could play the same time on the field. So I feel like that's something underrated that Loki doesn't get enough appreciation for. And I will also say that it took being up against this creativity for Noel Noa to finally make some changes to his own formation. Now, as for the data for PXG, Loki also has some pretty good results, with 7 of his players playing and 5 of them making it into the top 23, with understandably all of them being from the Shidou and Rin formation. Also, before we move on, one could argue that, well, Loki also came to the league to make himself stronger and to test Charles, just like Noah and Kaiser. But like I said earlier, Chris and Loki didn't let their ulterior motives stop them from being good coaches, while I feel like Noel Noa's goal did. So I just wanted to address that quickly, but for Loki's creativity and smart decisions as a coach, he gets the second place spot from me. Now we have finally reached the number 1 spot on this list, which is none other than Marc Snuffy, the master striker for the Ubers. I feel like out of all the coaches, I've seen the most praise for Snuffy over the years, which people rightfully do praise Snuffy's coaching, since Snuffy is a combination of all the strengths of the previous coaches, having wins under his belt like Noel Noa, strengthening his team on an individual level like Chris Prince, and making smart coaching decisions that benefit the whole team, and getting as many of his players past the final selection like Loki. Snuffy also clearly cares the most about his players. I mean, the fact that he wants Baru to be his successor means that he could be a direct influence why Baru could be a future new Gen 11, since of all the coaches, I could actually see Snuffy keeping in contact with Baru and helping him with his progress, which we know that he does go above and beyond for his players as a coach, and this would technically count towards him doing this act as a master striker, since he's directly helping a blue lock player, but that would all just be speculation for now. So getting into the reasons why I have Snuffy at first, Marc Snuffy does unique things that I haven't seen from the other coaches, which is teaching the players life lessons and making them think about football in a realistic way by saying that football at the end of the day is a job that helps to put food on the table. So he's helping to teach the Uber players lessons outside of just being a good football player, but actually teaching them good lessons as young, mature players that will soon be going out to play professional football and what that means. Even talking to Baru on a deeper level and showing him why he wouldn't be able to go through life with his type of attitude, and telling Baru the dark places he could end up if he doesn't change, since Snuffy knew better than anyone else and saw a lot of himself in Baru. This shows Snuffy taking another step beyond just being a coach to make the players better on the field, since we don't really see the other coaches have this deep of a conversation with their players and talk about the dark sides that come with the industry. And also, Snuffy addresses another aspect that I haven't really seen any other adult talk about in the series so far, which is the mental health of players and why it's so important. So I really did appreciate Snuffy discussing this. Another pro is that, similar to Chris Prince, he analyzed the data of every single player and made them individual strategies for each player, showing how much he cared about each of his players. And we even see Sendo make a comment about how detailed it is, showing that the information was not just surface level. Snuffy also shows how great he is as a coach, since he lets the Blue Lock players know that if they lose with his strategy, then he will take responsibility as the coach, which is just another indication of how mature Snuffy is, since it takes a lot to be accountable, and it would have been easy for him to say that if they lose, then it's all their faults. But knowing how much Snuffy is an advocate for mental health, this approach makes a lot of sense as well, since we are used to the harsher approach of ego, who says that if you fail, then you have no one to blame but yourself. But sometimes tough love isn't the only way you could coach someone as a team. Which brings me to the next point, is that Snuffy really does show the Uber players how to be a team and showing them a more traditional way of playing football by having Ubers be almost one organism, and even someone like Baru, at least for a while, work as a team in this type of system, which, given how difficult of a player that Baru is, it is very impressive that Snuffy, even if it was for an amount of time, could at least get Baru to finally work as a team with other players. I do think there are pros and cons to this, since yes, it's teaching the Uber player fundamentals of football and showing them that there is another approach than the more chaotic chaotic and egoist style that Blue Lock players have become used to during the project, and that approach isn't always going to work. So I do think it's good that they're being reminded that sometimes working as one unit in one team is a good and solid approach. But I will say that I'm not the biggest fan of the Uber system, and I haven't been since the Ubers versus Bastard match, which is feeding all their potential goals to Baru. I do think this strategy hinders all the Uber players, including Baru, since every other main striker at least had someone on their team that was somewhat challenging them for goals. With Bachira, it was Atoya. With Nagi, it was Chigiri. With Rin, it was Sendo. And with Isagi, it was basically his whole team, but mainly Kaiser. While Baru didn't really have that, since yes, Sendo was the second striker, but it's pretty clear that the majority of goals were going to go to Baru, and I think that's part of the reason why he currently isn't a part of the starting lineup in the World Cup, since this system revolves around him, and it would take a very specific situation for Ego to want to use this system, while all the other main strikers in Blue Lock did get a farther understanding of how to score with other people on their team trying to get their goals. But we did get a lot of development from Baru as a striker with his Predator Eye, and the other Uber players, like I said, while I do feel like the system hindered them in some ways as well, it did strengthen their skills as defenders and taught them how to just be solid defenders where their main job is to defend and not worry about trying to score as much, since given everyone but Aiku has a background in being a striker, I do think this was a good skill for them to develop. So for those reasons, I do feel like Snuffy should remain in first, but I did want to bring up the areas where it felt like Snuffy did fall short, since none of the coaches were perfect, including him. Before closing out this video, quickly going over the Uber's data, Snuffy is the only coach to not only have 6 players play, but every player that did play made it into the top 23, which is an achievement since while I think that every Blue Lock player should have been able to play at least once, it's understandable that most of the coaches did just want to invest in a few people, and the fact that every player that Snuffy did let onto the field did not fall below the 23rd spot once again shows how much he cares, since he knew that if he was going to invest in a player and let them touch the field, then he would do everything in his power to ensure that that player made the team, and he was able to achieve that goal. So if you had any doubts about Snuffy being in first, then this should further show you why he deserves this spot. Alright, this is the end of my video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments where you would rank these coaches and why. I do feel like Loki and Chris Prince could be switched, but hopefully I was able to explain my reasonings of why I had them where I had them and where I had every single coach, you know, because I do know everyone has slightly different lists, but these are my reasons, so I hope I was able to explain it. Also, good news for those of you that, occasionally keep up with my posts. I do finally have a new computer, so more videos should finally be coming out since I can edit a lot faster now. And I have so many fun ideas that I could finally release on the channel. So please like, comment, and subscribe so I know people want to see more and you guys don't miss it. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.